Although people think of Plasma as the strongest deck, I actually struggled with it for a while. The balancing effect is powerful, but doubling all required scores means that you need a really strong build to keep up. And especially at the higher stakes, it's easy to get too comfortable and be surprised by a big fight. I had to learn the specific nuances of the Plasma deck in order to make it through the high stakes, and I'd like to share those with you today. First, I'll talk you through the big picture concepts of how to use the Plasma deck effectively. Then, I'll take you through an example run at Gold Stake, demonstrating how to apply those concepts to the game. By the end, you'll have a much deeper understanding of the mechanics behind the Plasma deck, and you'll be ready to start putting some high scores on the board. Stay tuned for more. As you already know, the way Plasma deck works is by averaging out your chip and mold values before it scores your hand. This will always result in a higher score value, and so to compensate, every blind in the game requires twice as high a score to beat. At the early stakes, the Plasma effect is so powerful that you barely notice this doubling, but by the time of Purple Stake, you need 720,000 chips to beat Ante 8, and even Plasma builds can struggle to reach that mark. So the question is, how do we adjust our game plan to get the most out of the balancing effect? The conclusion most people reach is to go all in on chips. Chips usually have higher numerical values than mult jokers, so by going all in on chips, you maximize your value, right? Well, kind of. In the short term, yes, 5 chip jokers will absolutely get you the highest score possible, but the problem with chips is that they only scale additively and usually not very fast, effectively capping you to a certain score. At White Stake, this cap is lower than the score needed to beat Ante 8, so you don't really notice the effect. But once you're at Purple Stake or higher, your build will generally cap out at around 500,000 chips per round, which is almost but not quite enough to win the run. In order to get wins past Purple Stake, you need to leverage the multiplicative combos from mult-focused strategies, just like with every other deck. But because you rely on chips in the early game, the transition from chips to times mult can be really difficult. My recommendation is to use the following multi-stage game plan. In Ante 1 to 2, you want to buy exactly 2 jokers, 1 chip card and 1 scaling mult card. The chip card will win you early fights, and the scaling card will become your seed mult for the big multiplicative combo, and you save the rest of your money to start building interest. Once you have $20 to $25, you can start picking up more chip cards to keep advancing through the stakes. All the while, you should build up your scaling joker as well. Your ideal setup is to have 4 chip jokers, 1 big scaling joker, and never less than $25 in the bank. Once your scaling joker has 25 to 30 mult, you'll want to consider swapping chip jokers for times mult cards. You should calculate the equivalent chip value for any times mult card. For example, if your scaling joker has 25 mult and you pick up a 2x card, that's equivalent to 25 chips. For a 3x card, 50 chips. The first swap is the hardest because you'll likely be going down in power, so make sure to time it carefully. After the first swap, future swaps will become easier. If you have a 25 mult joker and a 2x card already, the next 2x will be worth 100 chips, and a 3x worth 150. Both are probably higher than some chip jokers in your inventory. The next times mult joker after that will be worth 200 to 450 chips, and the one after, 400 to 1000, at which point you're well beyond the threshold to beat Ante 8. Your final build should be 1 big plus mult joker and 4 times mult jokers. Enjoy your victory. I've also heard that you can use planet and tarot cards for your seed mults and have 5 times mult jokers instead. I haven't tried this approach myself, but I could see it working, so keep that pivot in mind. So, that's your game plan for winning on the higher stakes with the Plasma deck. It's a powerful technique, but it's pretty nuanced and difficult to execute. So, let me take you through an example run to demonstrate how it works. The first thing you should know is that in the Gold Stake, it is really easy to finish off the early fights with just a single 5-card hand. Normally, decks in Gold Stake have a hard time building up momentum because you need to spend all of your money just to buy enough mult and chips to get through the first few fights, and then you have no money to go into the mid-game and start re-rolling for your power cards. But because the Plasma deck scores so well so early, it's really easy for you to build up a strong early economy and take that into the mid-game. I pick up a Square Joker here, which is a really powerful chip card. It's not huge value right away, but the scaling does more or less keep up with the antes as long as I supplement it with other cards. It's a little sad that it's eternal because it means that I won't be able to sell it to get a different times mult card later, but I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of long-term value for the short-term guarantee that I will have enough chips to finish the first few antes. As you can see, I spend very little money in the early game and I've already accumulated 17 gold, but when I see a flash card in the shop, I do decide to buy it. That's because flash card is a really powerful scaling option that will likely be up to like 70 to 100 mults by the time I reach the last ante, and because my early game economy is so powerful because I have the Plasma deck, it's really easy for me to reroll a whole bunch and scale it really hard. So flash card is going to be my seed mult that then gets multiplied by all the times mult cards that I'm going to pick up later, and as you'll see, my build will become extremely powerful as a result. I also pick up an Odd Tot here, another really high value chip card. Odd Tot is really the ideal bridge that I would prefer over the Square Joker, but of course I wouldn't have seen it until round 4, so I couldn't have bought it sooner. And even though it will be really strong in the early game, it is probably one of the first jokers that I'm going to sell once I move into the scaling strong molt phase. I do reroll a couple of times in this shop, but I don't really get anything that good, but it's okay because each time I reroll, I'm growing my flashcard a little bit, which is my real goal with the rerolling. I decide to skip to pick up a Mega Buffoon pack because the ability to see 4 jokers and then pick 2 of them is worth more than the $7 I would get from a small blind fight. And technically I pass a shop, which means I can reroll less, but I'm a little low on money anyway, so it's not that big a deal. And in the pack, I get to pick up a Polychrome banner plus a throwback. These are both excellent cards for my build. Even though technically I don't need Times Molt yet because I don't have really good Bolt cards, throwback is going to become a late game piece by the time we get there, and a Polychrome banner is actually a really huge pickup for me. It gives me a little bit of multiplicative molt from the Polychrome effect, and because there's banner as well, that gets me a lot of chits, which will help generate early game value. So at the moment, I am well ahead of the curve and beating fights really easily. However, that will change by the time I reach the mid stakes, so I have to be careful to make sure I'm keeping pace with the increasing difficulty. In Ante 4, I skip again to pick up another Mega Buffoon pack, and in addition to seeing the pack, I get to grow my throwback slightly, and when I do look inside the pack, I see some really powerful cards. Blackboard, of course, is one of the best Times Molt jokers in the game, and there's also a blue joker for a little bit of extra chip value, and the 2 family cards I'm not that interested in because their effects are a little bit harder to trigger, but these 2 first jokers are so powerful. I end up swapping out Odd Todd for Blackboard because at this point I have enough molts on flashcard that Blackboard's going to get really good value, and even though I like blue joker, I don't really have room for it in this build, unfortunately. I already have a lot of chips for early game value between square joker and banner, and I'm not really willing to sell any of my Times Molt cards to make room for blue joker, so I do pass on it, but I am sad about it. Our build is scoring a nice 19,000 chips per hand, which is going to grow dramatically as flashcard gets bigger and bigger. Throwback will also scale from all of the skips that I do, so at this point I'm pretty much hoping that this setup will be able to carry me through Ante 8. I pick up a grabber here, which is really nice for increasing my chip output and economy, and though I am clearing the fights, I am starting to slow down a little bit. As you can see, it's now taking me 3 hands to beat a boss, so I might need a little bit of juice to get me over the finish line. And luckily, in the very next shop, I see a Stuntman. Even though Stuntman is not a multiplicative card, it is one of the best cards that you can get in the Plasma deck because 300 chips is just so much value, it's really hard to beat. And the -2 hand size doesn't really matter because you will kind of end up gravitating towards high card anyway, so I end up selling the banner and picking up Stuntman instead. I also skipped twice to pick up a whole bunch of tarot cards, mostly because I want to level up throwback. I'm not that interested in the tarot cards, although Hermit is huge for me. And loading into the next fight, my score has jumped up to 70,000 per hand, mostly thanks to the Stuntman. As powerful as it is, it can't really be a cornerstone of my strategy because you can only have one of them in your build at a time, so I do need the other jokers to get me more value so that I can actually finish the run. 70,000 chips is a lot, but I need 720,000 in order to finish the last boss, so I'm still well short of my goal. After re-rolling a whole bunch, I'm now at 88,000 chips instead, and this is really the hope that I level up flashcard enough by re-rolling a whole lot that flashcard plus throwback plus blackboard will all combo to give me the value that I need. It's kind of a rough spot to be in because I can't really swap out any of these jokers anymore. I just have to hope that this build is good enough to win. Skipping for the handy tag is also great here because I skip, I get a whole bunch of money that I can use to reroll, and I also get more value onto throwback that way. And in this boss fight, now that I've had a little bit more time to grow, I'm at 111,000 chips per hand. Times 5 is 555,000, which is still short of the 720,000 that I need in order to win. But as you can see, the build is growing, it is scaling, and there's a pretty strong chance that I can win. I skip to get another tarot card pack and I see a Hermit, which is also very lucky because more money equals more rerolls. And in the Ante 7 boss fight, I'm now up to 162,000 chits per hand. I am now finally at the threshold where I can probably beat the final boss because 160,000 times 5 is 800,000. And really that jump in value pretty much just came from 2 skips that leveled up throwback. This is the power of the multiplicative style of build. Even a small increase to the multiplication number has this knock-on effect that moves the entire build forward, and you need to leverage that power if you're going to win with the Plasma deck on gold stake. I decide to take the small blind fight here because by doing this fight I can see what my build is scoring per hand, and from there I can decide what I want to do with the next blind. Do I want to skip it for throwback value and go straight into the boss, or do I want to enter the shop and reroll because I think I need a little bit more value? I end up scoring 230,000 chits per hand, so I don't think I'm going to have a problem with the final boss. So in the next shop, I just reroll down all of my money, skip the big blind, and head straight for it. In the boss fight, I'm scoring 270,000 chips per hand. I got lucky too because the shuffle effect from Amber Acorn put my multiplicative cards after my seed mult card, flash card, so the first hand ended up scoring the maximum. And finally, after a long and arduous journey, I 3-shot the final boss, beating the gold stake with the Plasma deck. So this was actually the last deck I needed to get the Completionist Plus achievement, but I see I haven't gotten it after I closed the game, and I'm very confused. I assume the game must be bugging out. So I look it up online, and apparently there's a bug where you have to win 1 extra game in order for the achievement to register. So I did a quick little victory lap using the yellow deck at white stake, and sure enough, after I won that run, I joined the hallowed ranks of Balatro players who have the Completionist Plus achievement. I have spent way too much time with this game, so please subscribe to my channel so that it feels like it was worth the time investment. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.